to be resourceful and to figure it out. The information is out there. There's nothing holding you back but yourself.
I was just always looking on like, oh, how to make money online. And I was trying a bunch of things that absolutely failed, but that's kind of how you learn. That's how you grow.
But being able to at least create that runway tied to that resourcefulness right there becomes, I'd say a recipe. I know nothing's perfect.
If you've ever thought about quitting your job and relocating to another country while traveling the world, then you're going to love today's guest because this is exactly what he did. Daniel is the founder of YouTube channel, Full Value Dan, and he also has the unique perspective of being a former team member of Michael and I at Disney. And he definitely can teach us a thing or two about crypto, fake crypto, and all types of crypto. So welcome, Dan.
Hey, thanks for having me. Always good to catch up with you guys.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So maybe let's start, how long has it been since you left Disney?
As of November 28th, 5 years.
Wow. I can't believe it's been 5 years.
Yeah. And I remember that specifically because I wanted my last day at Disney to be like right after the Thanksgiving holidays. I just kind of wanted like those 2 extra free days. And then it's like, all right, I'm out. I quit on a Monday.
I actually remember the day you came and said, I'm going to leave. And this is what I'm doing. I was like, wow, that's amazing.
I mean, it was a great journey. Honestly, I think it's not for everyone, especially if you're at a younger age. I think it is for people at an older age, because if let's say you're in your early 20s, you still have a lot to learn. You have to learn soft skills and discipline. Because I've worked with like a few younger people who have never worked in an office, and they're so unreliable, and they don't know how to communicate well. And that's like one of the things you learn in an office setting. You learn that discipline, you learn the soft skills of figuring things out and like how to approach things and how to make things as best as possible rather than just getting the job done.
It's funny when you say that, I feel like, oh man, I want to open up a whole nother can of worms. Maybe we'll save for a future where we start talking about, the whole question of remote work. And when can you? Because there's some offices that are actually saying, yes, you can, but only once you've had this much time in the office, like initially, to address some of what you're describing, which is really interesting. So
That absolutely makes sense. Even though I consider myself somewhat disciplined and self-aware, it's still very hard to stay focused when you have all these temptations of not working while you're at home.
oh yeah, absolutely. Even during COVID, I found myself trying to escape from my family because, it sounds horrible, but they're a distraction in their own right. I'm like, it's so
Mhm.
much fun to play with them, especially when some of them are like, hey, Dad, want to play Super Smash? I'm like, oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's
Um,
like, that sounds way better than work. Let's do
yeah,
that.
exactly. What actually brought you to that decision that it was time for you to leave, if you will, corporate America?
I think it's mostly because I felt like I wasn't being challenged enough and I wanted to take on like new challenges and like new
Artin wasn't challenge
adventures.
you enough? Come on, Artin. Just kidding. Yeah.
I mean, it was like, it's because of the Editors Guild. Like, you're very like, this is all
Yes.
you can do. You're not supposed to branch out of that.
Yeah. I get what you're saying too. And there's also something to be said about there are certain roles where when they're hired, this is like what that role is. And you are definitely somebody who's capable of, those multiple hats. But were you not interested? I can't recall it. Were you interested in trying to move more into management leadership, or was that also not of interest to you?
It was low interest. And actually, as I'm running my own business, I hired a couple people and I learned I do not like being a manager. I do not like telling people what to do. I want limited responsibility. That is like the goal in life. Because, if you're like a manager, you're worrying about things all the time and you're always following up and you're like checking the quality of like the work. That if you're just like a cog in the system, being a cog is nice. It has limited responsibilities.
And that's why I was curious too, because from a growth perspective, sometimes you do hit that because oftentimes in the corporate world, well, in order to, if you will, in some ways fill the challenge of wearing those multiple hats, often in corporate world, it means, well, you have to be promoted, you have to have this team, and that's where you get the hats because they're all wearing hats. But otherwise, a lot of the roles are very focused on here is kind of what you do within this role. Within a guild, sometimes it's even more so limited factor because then it's like now you're being told also, oh, and you can't do that. because once you do that, you then have to fall into this classification. So it's definitely a certain swim lane you have to fall into.
It is interesting though how the corporate world rewards you managing people versus being that individual contributor, but a high, like top performing individual contributor. It seems like the corporate world leans towards you can only get promoted if you're managing people, which is silly to me.
Yeah, there's this joke by Mitch Hedberg. He's like, "Yeah, you're a comedian. Like, all right, write me a script." Well, he's like, "Well, I don't go up to a chef. Like, oh, do you cook? Well, can you farm? You know, it's that level of like, well, I'm really good at this thing. Well, you should also do this instead."
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny. That's interesting. I'll say there's very few companies out there like Netflix did, like there are ICs there, independent contributors who did not have large teams, but were still paid the big bucks. But I feel like it's pretty rare in companies. And when you get to those roles, often it's like those roles that are like engineering or something like that, where they do look at, okay, well, I can articulate this person's value in code and what they give us, and therefore we're willing to pay them this because they do, 4 times as much code as somebody else. But I feel like for most companies, it's a pretty hard thing to measure and just not something that a lot of companies acknowledge. For you though, when you finally did make that decision, like, was it something that you had been thinking about for a period of time, or did you just kind of wake up one morning and say, you know what, this is it, and I'm moving to Taiwan? What ultimately brought you to that full decision? Yeah.
I was definitely thinking about it for several years. I was, just always looking on like, oh, how to make money online, and I was trying a bunch of things that absolutely failed, but that's kinda how you learn, that's how you grow. It's not as easy as it says, like, I did tried selling stuff on Amazon and buying, like, stuff wholesale from China. That is a big money suck because you're in this competitive market on Amazon, you have to pay to advertise, otherwise your listings show up on the very last page, and then Amazon is just, like, raking in all those fees while you're barely breaking even, if anything.
Right. It's like the people who make money on Amazon are the people who teach money how to make money on Amazon. Uh, it reminds me a bit too of like the gold rush. It's like, you want to be the one selling the
Sell shovels.
shovels. Yeah,
Mhm,
exactly. Maybe the jeans,
mhm,
too, but not
yeah.
that. So, that is interesting. I had pondered at times exploring that, but then I have always talked myself out of it because, somebody else that we work with, Jason, if you remember Jason, he, found himself with his product that he sold through Amazon is often getting in that place where he's like, oh my gosh, they keep like, they're going to charge me to store it. They're going to charge me this. And, yeah, there definitely is all these add-ons that start to happen.
Yeah, that's what people don't talk about, like, how much it's gonna take, and, it's not worth it for most people.
Right. Well, I admit I always thought that initially the focus that you were going to go down, you were the points guy, for lack of a better way to put it. For me, you were traveling the world in this way that I tried to always wrap my head around, and you'd give me advice, but I always be like, whoa, how does he do that? And this is, using credit card points and all that kind of stuff. Are you still doing a lot of that?
I'm doing that personally. I tried making content on that, initially, but it was really hard to gain traction just because it is a very niche topic, and the people that had been established and doing that for years already are, like, already at the top of YouTube. So, it's very competitive for that small audience.
Yeah. So you have to kill one of them in order to take over? Is that
To kill a lot of them, yeah, and they're all like Asian guys with glasses, like, there's no differentiation. I'm like, "Oh, alright, well,"
why
I
not
was like,
win?
"No wonder no one clicked on me. They thought they went to the other guy." Yeah.
Well, then I'm
Is
curious.
was that the first kind of attempt at content creation, like full value down? Is that what the initial attempt was?
Yes, so I was going with that because, I was traveling and I was, like, giving, like, these kinda tips while I was traveling, but then COVID happened and I was like, "Alright, time to change this from a travel channel to more on, value-focused stuff, like what I do with banks and credit cards, because you don't have to travel, like, COVID's not gonna stop me from doing that. There's still all these offers available."
And then when you did that though, then what made you transition to, and let's make sure we get it right too. When we say I'm probably oversimplifying this. Harton's a little bit more into some of the crypto, the Bitcoin, and even some of the blockchain that I am. But is that like what then had you hone in on that specific focus? And actually, if you can share a little bit more with the audience, and even probably for us, how you've evolved to what it is today?
So I started making crypto content because there was one full tutorial on how to use Coinbase Pro, which is like more of their advanced trading features. And that intimidates a lot of people. I had some friends who were investing in crypto, and I was like, oh, you got to use this feature because even though it looks intimidating, you save like 90% on fees. And those fees can be a lot of money if you use Coinbase and their simple trading feature. So I did, as full value Dan, I wanted to make sure people knew how to trade and saved money. So I did a full tutorial on that. That got a lot of traction. And I'm like, all right, um, that seems good. So I made more banking and credit card stuff. I was like, oh, still no attention. Let's see if I make another crypto video. And like that got a lot of attention. I was like, well, maybe I'll just do this. Like I'm into crypto anyway.
That's awesome. I remember something you had told me too, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but I thought it was fascinating that you eventually hit this point where because you enjoy learning so much about all that, didn't you take a job even though you didn't have to for a period of time just so you could learn more about? I don't know if it was crypto or Bitcoin or blockchain.
So two things. One, while I was working at Disney in 2018 or 2017, early that year, I took a job at Marugame Udon, which is this Japanese noodle restaurant, because I wanted to learn how to make noodles. And I was like, well, I could either pay like $100 to learn how to make noodles in this like class, or just get a job and they pay me to do that.
That's
So
amazing.
I did that for like 2 months, and I was like, oh, they're not letting me touch the noodles. I'm happy to get out of here.
It
Like I was
wasn't as
mostly
easy as
washing. Yeah, like it's like that's a top level job in that field. It's like, well, yeah, that's what I wanted to learn. They made me like wash dishes or be the cashier because like apparent like it's very surprising that people are bad at math. Like people are very bad at math that they really have to rely on the cash register and they just count very slow. That was kind of shocking for me. And then like also washing dishes because like I'm very attentive. I was like, well, that dish is still dirty. Really gotta clean that thing. Yeah, that's what they made me do, so I got out, after 2 months 'cause, I it was mostly the drive 'cause, after, my morning shift at the noodle restaurant, I drive down to Disney. It takes, like, an hour 'cause, it started at, like, 4 PM, and it's, like, rush hour starting up, and that was the side job I had while at Disney. While I was making content in 2021, I took a job with Binance to make content for them just to see what I could learn. But with a remote job, it's a lot different than like an in-person job. Everyone is very isolated. It's hard to start up conversations. And I was really looking to learn more from my peers because that's the one thing I've been lacking ever since leaving Disney. Having like peers you can talk to, learn from them, and like just get a broader overview of like what's out there in the world. And that's what I was hoping to learn. So that's the number one thing you can learn if you're in an office. You really got to talk to people, see what they're interested in, and you could learn a lot.
How did part two though happen for you? The noodle restaurant didn't in the end work out quite so well for you. How did the second one work out for you?
I did that for a few months, but I wasn't really learning anything new. There was it was like too free, I think. They were like, "Oh yeah, you can make a video on whatever you want, just clear it with us first." And I was like, "Well, I kind of want direction. I kind of want like, you know, I want some guidance." So I learn from you guys too, like what you're looking for, what you're focusing on, and what I can share. But it was like very free. So when you kind of have like that open field, it's hard to focus and it's hard to get some direction. And since it was more of a startup vibe, that everyone is very hands off. Now, I probably could have got by for months with like very little work, but uh, that's not something I do. I really wanted to like just cut ties and grow my own channel, because I was really there to learn more, and that's what I normally look for in some kind of job. Like besides money, you got to get like something out of it that you can bring to another place.
I love your mentality, which is, well, I want to learn this. Who are other people who are playing in the space, and how do I embed myself with them? Even though I think there's also the lessons in there, as we find out with Noodle Place. It's like, all right, am I going to be able to touch the noodles? But something Art and I talk about at times, and obviously something he and I also pursued at Disney was the idea of a side hustle. But your side hustles are definitely unique when you consider that one. Especially again, I'll focus on that later one because in that case, it's like, wow, you already are over here as a successful content creator, making enough money that you don't have to take the other job, but you chose to. And I guess you could say it's the same with the new place you chose to. And I think that's powerful in its own right, though, in a place where so many people want to get, which is they're pursuing a gig for the learning and the growth, or the connections, whatever you say, not just the paycheck. I think so few people get to do that in life that that's pretty spectacular that you're at that point where you can do it. So I want to take it back real quick to why Taiwan? Let's start there, actually. Yeah, why Taiwan?
Initially, I was gonna take a year off and just try living in different parts of the world for 2 months at a time. And, before we even got to that point, I already traveled to over 60 different countries. So I was very familiar of where I wanted to try living for 2 months. And the first stop was Taiwan, followed by South Korea, then Japan, and then like Poland, maybe some other spots in Eastern Europe for the summer, and then try to figure things out. So after my first month in Taiwan and like experiencing local life, I loved it. Like transportation is super easy and affordable. People are nice and friendly. The food is amazing. And then I started dating my now wife, and I was like, you know what? I think I'm gonna see how things go here and stay here a little longer. And that 2 months turned into 5 years now.
It was the
Nice.
girl. No, I know.
That was another big factor. But, it's affordable and the food is good and like healthcare. I don't go bankrupt on healthcare. So I was like, oh, this is great. Like I'll survive here.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you still travel very much?
Yes, actually, yeah, maybe too much as of this last year. I was in Singapore last month. Next, in like 2 weeks, we're going to Okinawa, going to LA in November. If you guys want to meet up. Uh, in January, another trip to different parts of Japan. Then going to Dubai in April for a crypto conference. And then like several other like smaller trips later that year. And it's all like with frequent flyer miles, so it's not like I'm spending thousands of dollars being a traveler.
Well, I wouldn't have expected anything less, considering.
But I think that's the other amazing things. What you just mentioned now, and then the fact that you had been to, over 60 different countries before, like the fact that you did hone in on how you can optimize, how you leverage the frequent flyer, or how you looked at just points in general and how you're leveraging all that. Because I assume now you're probably savvy about, well, I mean, you were savvy before around any of the expenses that you have, making sure that those were done in a way that it always pays off for you, point wise. How did you get into that? And if there was a good resource that you'd say for anybody who's like, dude, I want that life, like, how does somebody get started in that?
Someone walked me through it. I was riding on a plane from Peru back to LA, and I was not seated with like my friend that I was traveling with. I was seated with like two strangers, and then there was this baby crying very loudly near us. And then when the flight attendant came by to offer us drinks, like all three of us ordered a beer at the same time, just because like we were all very stressed out. And then we started laughing, we started talking, and then the person I was sitting next to was, what they call a travel hacker, as someone who gets credit card points, uh, gets the miles, closes the card, and just does it all over again. So he explained how that all works. I just questioned him for like the next few hours and how it works. And he provided me like his contact and some resources to get started with. And then I spent the next 2 weeks just reading everything I could. I was in the forums, I was in the comments, I was reading every article, and I just wanted to learn how everything worked because it's not something that's very easy to unravel. But if it's something I'm interested in, I'm going to deep dive into it. As for anyone who wants to get started, not easy. You have to read a lot of things. There isn't just a 10-minute video that's going to explain everything. But essentially, it's that like all of these airline companies have their own currency, frequent flyer miles, that you can redeem at different rates. Now, airlines have partnered with banks to offer airline credit cards. And these airline credit cards offer frequent flyer miles bonuses if you sign up and spend a certain amount of money. So You just sign up for them, make that spend requirement, close the credit card after a year, use those miles to travel. There's also a lot of nuances in how to build up your credit and how to use these things, when to close them, but that requires a very deep dive.
Yeah. That's amazing. I've always been fascinated with that. And again, just every time I would talk to you about it, I'd be like, it's like, yeah, it's definitely, I could see how I'm like, okay, the beginner level, I'm trying to understand a match here, but you're a sensei when it comes to uh, explaining that.
Yeah, I'm really excited for my trip to Dubai just because we booked first class back with Etihad. And there's this like certain redemptions are cheaper with certain airlines. So with American Airlines between North Asia, which is Taiwan, and the Middle East, it's 50,000 miles to fly in first class, 40,000 in business, 25 in economy. Now with American Airlines, you can get like 70,000 miles just for signing up for one credit card. So that's almost enough for two one-way first class tickets between Taiwan and the Middle East. So I booked my ticket for this conference in first class, and I'm very excited to be flying with them.
That's awesome,
That's
man.
awesome.
I love it. So share a little more about Full Value Dan and what's next for you.
Full Value Dan is just me creating content in the crypto world, just because there are a lot of, let's say, low quality content out there where maybe someone doesn't fully understand it, but they are trying to explain it anyway, or it's full of people promoting things that will really cause people to lose money. So the goal of my channel is just to make content that people understand, that they also understand the risks and what to look for things that could potentially benefit them. I actually haven't really taken many sponsors in the last year just because of the bear market and the collapse of FTX, which was trusted by a lot of content creators, but a lot of the people who did sign up got burned. So I'm very picky. But I came to the conclusion, if I came to the conclusion that, do I want to be a good content creator? Do I want to be a good marketer? Do I want to be a good investor or a good trader? And what I wanted to do was to be a good investor and content creator. So that's the two things I'm really focusing on. If you watch other content creators, maybe they're better marketers where they don't fully understand things, they'll promote it and then claim ignorance. Well, that's not something I want to do. So the goal of my channel is just to make quality content, even if there isn't a lot of people looking for it. I focus a lot on SEO, so some of the videos gain more traction over time as interest grows. But I actually hate recording content and I hate editing content, but I love researching content. Like I could do that all day.
Interesting. Have you hired anybody on the editing and the other? Okay, solve for those.
Yeah. So I tried several companies, I tried several people, but I ran into the issue of like the soft skills where people, they'll do something and say it's done, but they don't check their work. And I'm like, oh, there's a lot of issues here. You didn't fully understand the task. And then I spent more time with all the back and forth revisions and notes than editing it myself.
I've definitely run into that where either, I don't know if people are just not paying attention, or is it they're just trying to slide one under you thinking you're not going to pay attention. But it seems like a common theme when you're kind of hiring freelancers.
Yeah, so it's really hard to find like the quality freelancers. I did not find them. So I just edit myself because I don't want to go through that process again of like, onboarding someone and training them and then spending months like trying to improve them when I can just edit myself and have all that free time still.
There were these a couple of content creators. They're well-known editors who now have their own channel, and they used to work for like the Mr. Beast and the others. And it's pretty
Oh,
incredible.
the editing podcast.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know if you heard the one recently where they're like, they actually now are like, they think the MO is as an editor to be able to go in and be like, I want X percentage of basically any of the earnings that come in on this, and I'll come in and I'll edit all your content. That's exactly their premise. Is they're like, that's what makes some of these shows. It's pretty incredible. So
Yeah, I've seen like the time and effort and what it takes to create some of that stuff and how you're going over all these revisions. If you have a good editor, they're absolutely worth that.
yeah, no, it's a great point. My a friend of mine, he has a channel called Rob Built, and it's on short-term rentals. And again, it's incredible. He was fortunate to have met this editor early on. And I mean, heck, they've been roommates too, like throughout some of the stuff, which is, pretty awesome. Just, I think it's awesome from just a creative standpoint of brainstorming these ideas and what they did. But you could see how they play off of each other so well in that, the editor knows now if Rob does something and just has some sort of a response to something like where he's thinking, the editor knows now, no, I'm keeping that. I'm going in, I'm going to add a thought bubble to what Rob is thinking. And he makes it hilarious. And early on, that's kind of what they discovered was something he did for the earlier content. And he's like, this is amazing. And they've just made this really great duo. And I think if somebody could find that, that's pretty fantastic. I do have somebody I'm going to try to maybe put you in contact with. I've thought about using them. I've seen what incredible work they have done for somebody else. Maybe there's something out there, but I'll at least send the information over to try to find it, because it sucks to be imprisoned to that piece of it until you can find that right companion to take, lift you off that. Even right now, as I'm trying to work on some stuff for my program, I'm like, the editing I've done, I'm like, I could maybe get this out to someone, but I've even tried like on LinkedIn getting like somebody's help on creating carousels and stuff like that for there. And it's like, all of a sudden I'm like, it's exactly what you described. I'm like, I don't want to have to keep on saying the font's different in this one than this one, or the color. I don't think you use the color code I gave you.
Yeah, I had one issue with kerning. Are you familiar with kerning?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I was like, some of the same words are like this long, and then it's the same word somewhere else, and it's this long. It's like, there's no consistency. Yeah, and it's just like, how did you do that?
That stuck with me because I oversaw the title graphics team at Disney, and that team over there, I remember when we were doing the Star Wars crawls, and the kerning was this huge thing that kept coming up. So yes, that one burned into my mind. But yeah, a lot of people otherwise wouldn't notice or think about it. But when it's your content, you're like, how dare you?
Yeah, and then, I was speaking with an editor. They didn't know what kerning was. As I was describing that issue, I'd have like screenshots of like, oh, that's what that is. Like, okay, this is not an experienced editor.
Yeah. Dan, I want to go back. You mentioned FTX fallout and all that. Crypto kind of being in a winter season, as some might call it. Where is the crypto market at, and where do you see it going?
I think it's bottomed out, where like the only people who are invested in it are the people that are very long term. Right now, I think it's picking up more steam going into 2024, as recently an Ethereum futures ETF was just approved by a lot of different entities. So now you can invest in futures ETF, futures Ethereum on the stock market. I think if we see a Bitcoin spot ETF get approved, we're going to see Ethereum spot ETFs get approved too, which could bring in a lot more money for the crypto markets. As far as crypto's usefulness, it's there. It's just not used by everybody. So it's really not for everyone at the moment. There are a lot of scams out there. There's a lot of ways to easily lose money in crypto, but the use cases are there. Like there's a lot of demand for it for the people who like using it or who may need it. There's like real world assets on there where you could trade treasury bills. Like there's some companies that are just investing in it and passing that yield to the people that are invested in the cryptocurrency. I recently just did a video on Filecoin and how decentralized data is going to how decentralized data is going to bring in more users into crypto and blockchain, just because decentralized data is 100 times cheaper than Google and Amazon. As you know, with like these big AI models and people building anything that needs a lot of storage data, storage is expensive. And if you can spend 100 times less, you're going to do that.
Absolutely. That's fascinating. That piece of it's fascinating. I admit the crypto side, I've always been anxious, nervous of, even as I remember Arton sharing at one point his 40th birthday was paid for basically by, wasn't it Ethereum? Was that the one? I can't even pronounce it right. Which one?
Yeah. I mean, before the 2017 kind of bull market and then, early 2018 crash, I was really into it. And I was, following the ICOs. I don't know how much ICOs are happening these days. But at 2018, at first I'm like, oh, I'm glad I got out. And then it went back up again. Oh, Dad, why didn't I get out? And then when it crashed again, I'm like, okay, I'm glad I got out. So it was this like roller coaster thing. But yeah, when I got out at a good time, where I didn't lose money.
That's
That's the
always good.
goal of most crypto investors. Yeah. Just
Yeah.
don't lose money.
Any
Yeah.
investing, right? Yeah, for that matter. No,
Yeah.
but I still get anxious about it. I just don't. For me, there's something about it. I don't know if it's the tangible aspect of it or just because it's not necessarily supported and backed still by a lot of like governments and things. But I get nervous, even though I know at some point in the future somebody's gonna be like,
That's very likely going to happen if it
Yeah.
goes up because crypto bros are very cocky. I'm going to be one of them. Like I told you guys.
It's totally true. I'll have to then buy just something just so I could be like, okay, I had something just more.
Yeah, I got some dog coins. Dog coins.
Exactly it. So what's next for you? Is it just, kind of continuing? And this isn't a trick, by the way. Sometimes people think they got to be able to be like, well, plan is to be a billionaire by X. But what I appreciate like with you is you've always maximized for lifestyle and what you're looking at. And even now with what you do, it's like, I remember you were telling me when we were having a conversation before that at times, hopefully I'm not putting you in a bad place here, but I think a wife had even said to you like, well, hey, what are you doing during some of your day? Cause you could shoot these videos, you could get them out there. And sometimes you're like, okay, well, done for the day. So like you maximize for lifestyle. So I'm just curious, like, are you just like, no, you know what? This is where I want to be right now. I know you said before we started the recording, you're really happy, but like, do you have things that you are striving for? Or are you like, no, I just want to continue to make great content for people that are out there? What's that look like for you?
A lot of things there, but
Yeah, sorry.
yeah, like when you're making content for crypto, I'm doing a lot of research, and sometimes I'll spend like a whole day doing research, and then come to the realization like, oh, this is not a good project. This is not something I should make a video about because I want to save people. And when you make crypto content, you have to also be very gentle with how you say things because if you say things too negatively and aggressively, then the people who are supporting that coin are going to come after you. So you kind of have to give things like neutral, like, well, this is what this says, and then the you make your own
Yeah.
assumptions with that if you're in the audience. Yeah. As for my
Sounds like
journey
corporate
and the
politics,
next,
by the way. Yeah. Sounds like
yes,
corporate politics. I'm there. Yeah.
and that's one of the soft skills you have to learn with
Yeah.
creating content.
Makes sense.
And as for my next steps, I think I want to get more into the venture investing. So, like, I've made some contacts at some of the crypto conferences with people who do venture investing. Like, how do you get into that? What does that look like? What's the process? Like, do you how do people get paid? How do people invest in this fund? I'm very curious about that, just because I like doing research and maybe I could be a part of that. I've just been kind of looking passively though, because creating content is more of what I've been doing lately. It's a very strong hobby to career level where I am making enough to get by. Um, I don't necessarily need to do it, but yeah, I am in a good place where I can follow what I'm interested in rather than having to keep working and support myself to stay alive. So I'm very fortunate in that sense.
Well, I mean, some might call it, you've, nailed life. That's it. That's what everybody's
That's it, you're
after.
done.
Thank you. Thank you. So I kind of wonder about that too when you see like Mark Cuban still working, Elon Musk, Joe Biden. I was like, man, all these people are very old and have enough money not to work. Like, why are you working? But I kind of get it. Like, I didn't do much for like the first 6 months. I was like uh, very hands off with the Amazon thing because there's only so many things you could do in a day. And then after 6 months of watching like TV and browsing the internet, I was like, oh, I got to do something. I need to challenge my mind. I need to learn something.
I think that's even given in like some of those examples you gave before where you're like, well, let me get a job, even though I had a job and I didn't need the money, but I wanted to learn that skills. And I think that's quality that the Cubans and the others out there will do. It's almost like they just like the challenge or they just like the learnings. And just by the nature of that, then other things follow. And Justin Welsh, who talks about solopreneurship and such on LinkedIn and Twitter, I think the way he's phrased like what success looks like is to be able to do what you want, when you want, with who you want. And that versus the idea of not saying, I want to have $1 billion. It's instead that threshold. But once you've done that, it turns out that what you want now might be, these ventures and the other things like that you then want to go down that pathway to do, because it's just that fun challenge. You want to get good at making noodles,
Yeah,
by the way,
absolutely.
have you cracked the noodle thing yet?
No, in Taiwan, everyone just makes good noodles already, so I just don't have to do that.
Instead of making, you just moved somewhere where everybody makes it. I
Yeah,
mean, that's a
that
good
was like
strategy
that was
too.
the yeah, that was the
Yeah.
solution I was looking for. Because as you know, like if you're living in the valley in Los Angeles, there's not a lot of options.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what would you say for, I mean, like, I feel like most people, who hear your story, they're like, man, so he travels the world. He's in essence living a lifestyle now that, is allowing you to pretty much do what you want, when you want with who you want. Not pretty much, it is. And so you are, well, somebody here might have at one point said American dream, but you're Taiwan. You're living the Taiwan dream. You're just living the dream.
Yeah,
So
just living the dream.
you're
Yeah.
just
The
living the
global
dream, right?
dream.
Let's make it work. Yeah, the world dream, because you're traveling it too. What advice would you give? I know you mentioned earlier a key component of getting some of those initial soft skills and things that really helped you, but is there anything else you would add to that would help somebody who says, wow, I would love to be in, Dan's shoes in another 5, 10 years? I guess it depends their age, but
Well, I think for me, I got lucky just because, I bought a home when it was affordable and then I sold it and that gave me the safety I needed to just try not working for a few years and just follow my passions. Cuz if I didn't have that, then, I could have been working like from paycheck to paycheck. So you can't really do that. You don't have that security. So if you're in those early stages, I'd say keep working, build up a fund where you would be able to get away with not working for a while, even if you have to live in like a low cost country. There are ways to do that. You could ask AI and it will actually give you very good answers on how you can do that legally. And learn as much as you can while you're working in an office because you should just get your work done. And then with all that free time, you learn as much as possible, either online or from your peers. If you want to work independently, it's really not for everyone because you need a lot of discipline. You need to have a lot of patience too. You're going to be very uncomfortable because if you've ever worked in a cafe and seriously worked in a cafe, it sucks. It's super loud. Sometimes the tables are sticky. It's the table wobbles. It's not a comfortable experience. Like I'd rather work in an office than at a cafe.
yeah, right. All my place is Starbucks, so I love working. Those locations, but no, I
I
get what
think
you.
the other thing that I'll extract based on what you said, like an advice, your resourcefulness is pretty incredible. It's like when you want to figure something out, you just figure it out. And I think that's a good mindset and something to learn, just to be resourceful and to figure it out. The information is out there. There's nothing holding you back but yourself.
So I think that's another soft skill, like resourcefulness. If you are like broke and have the internet, well, you can learn resourcefulness and find ways to not be broke.
I think that's it though. I think when you combine also, that resourcefulness, problem solving, however we want to look at it, it's like with the other thing that you mentioned, you gave yourself enough runway. And sure, it might have been a house that did it then. People can do that. There's ample ways that people can do. I mean, house hacking's popular now for somebody to get into a house, even when they can't afford the full house themselves. There's ample other ways people could do it, saving in their jobs, but being able to at least create that runway tied to that resourcefulness right there becomes, I'd say a recipe. I know nothing's perfect, but in essence, now you can work on those iterations, realize maybe the channel on the points guy isn't going to work, but then you find your niche. So I think that in itself is gold for people to realize.
So how can people find you?
Full Value Dan at YouTube and X, formerly known as Twitter.
All right. Thanks, Dan.